Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. This podcast is going to walk you through my journey into mediumship and how I came to realize that I could communicate with souls that have passed over. My adventure started just over a year ago when unusual situations started happening to me. It wasn't until I really started to pay attention to them that it all started to come together. I wrote down everything that I was experiencing this past year in a little black book, and this podcast is going to be a recap of all of those memories leading up to where I am today in my mediumship journey. I will be releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and I recommend listening to the podcast in order, starting with episode 1, as my story will unfold more week by week. If you would like to stay connected with me, follow me on Instagram at mediuminthemiddle. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6. In this episode, I'm going to go back to before episode 1, before the first Luigi story, and explain everything that was happening before the first big experience happened with spirit. So there was definitely some smaller things that were happening earlier on, but I didn't have the experience of, I knew what was happening my whole life. From the age of 4, this used to happen to me, or in my teenage years, it started happening to me. For me, my experiences just started just over a year ago, and I don't really remember much before that I can think of even now to be like, oh yeah, this used to happen, or I had an imaginary friend that used to talk to me, or I could see imaginary friends. I don't have any of that experience. So I want to just go back and explain all the little things right now because I think that will help piece things together a little bit more. So the earliest memory that I have with anything spiritual or anything metaphysical or anything of the other side with psychics or with card readers or anything like that is I had a few friends and a few of my cousins used to go to a few of the popular people in the town that I lived, and they would go for sessions with these psychics. And I was always so interested in what they had to say from their sessions, so we would talk about it. Each time that they would go, I would be really interested in what they had to say. And every time that we would be having one of these conversations where they would be updating me about something weird would always happen. It would be something simple like the TV shut off, the lights flickered, something would fall in another room that would startle us. And it got to the point where eventually I didn't like talking about those things anymore because I would say, okay, we have to stop talking about this now because whenever I do start talking about it, something weird will always happen. And something always did happen. I used to watch a TV show often called The Long Island Medium, and I was very, very intrigued by the show. And for some reason, I believed the show was real. I didn't believe that it was fake or scripted, just based on the way that the people reacted to Teresa telling different people messages. I really thought that if there was that many good people who could act and cry at a drop of a hat or change their emotions, then the Angelinas and the Brad Pitts of the world wouldn't have a job. So that's why I was so convinced. I was like, there's no way these people can react this way and be honest about it, or Hollywood wouldn't be Hollywood. And now that I do this work, that's almost my validation when someone does react that way. It's like, okay, well, they wouldn't be bawling out of nowhere or start crying in the middle of the grocery store if this really didn't hit home somehow. So one day, my roommate and I were watching the show, and she had never seen it before, so I was trying to explain it to her, and I said, you know what, let's just watch an episode so that you can see it. It's a really good show. So we turned on the show and we were watching and talking, and we were just sitting at the kitchen table and watching the TV. And then all of a sudden the TV shut off. And I looked at her and she looked at me and I said, did you shut the TV off? She said, no. Did you shut the TV off? And I said, no. And we were kind of like, don't mess with each other, because we were just having the conversation of every time we talk about these things, something weird happens. So then she's like, where's the remote? And I said, I don't know, where's the remote? And we're kind of frantic at this point. And we find the remote, and she's like, turn the TV on, turn the TV on. So I'm pressing the on button, and it won't turn on. The TV won't turn on. I'm pressing it probably 17 times, 20 times. She's like, turn it on, turn it on. I'm like, it won't turn on, it won't turn on. And then the TV finally turns back on, and we had the cable where the blue area at the bottom of the screen pops up to tell you what the show is. And in the little blue box, for some reason, what our eye both went to was a sentence that said, "will not turn off." And then we both looked at each other again and we said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yes, I saw that." And then we shut off the TV and we were done for the day. But it was just little things like that would always happen whenever I would be talking about kind of the supernatural, weird things would happen. I've also worked in 2 hotels which were haunted, and I had ghost stories to tell. So when anyone would ask, "Oh, is the hotel haunted?" I'd be like, "Oh yeah, like all these things have happened to me." But of all those experiences, it was never anything as big as episode 1 with Luigi. It was always the TV would shut off, the lights would flicker, water would turn on and off. That was a big one. So it never really occurred to me to put anything together. Energetically wise, I also want to explain what was happening in my Reiki sessions before episode 1s, because that kind of gave me more insight into what was happening. In one particular story, this story is still a big deal to me because I can't believe that it happened. Me and Joe at the time were on a plane, and we were on a small plane from Calgary to Edmonton. So it was 2 seats on the left and 2 seats on the right. So I was on the aisle and Joe was on the window. And in front of Joe, there was a 7-year-old child. And in front of me was a mom holding a baby who was maybe 10 months old. Across the aisle from her was maybe a 2-year-old. And then beside her was the dad. So we were sitting behind a family. We all boarded the plane. It was a small plane, so it didn't take long. And the little 2-year-old that was sitting across the aisle from me started to lose her mind. Kicking, screaming, yelling, taking off her seatbelt and running down the aisle. They would pick her up, put her back in her seat, do her seatbelt up. She would take it off, run again. They would pick her up, put her back in her seat. She'd take her seatbelt off. Then she started kicking the seat in front of her, kicking it, screaming. She was losing her mind. And the parents didn't know what to do. They had 3 kids. They were trying to calm her down. So all 3 stewardesses come over and they're trying to calm her down and they're trying to talk to her and let her know the plane's needing to take off. So one stewardess goes and gets her a Kit Kat. So as you know, a Kit Kat has 4 pieces in it. So the dad gives her a piece of the Kit Kat one at a time. So he hands her a piece of the Kit Kat. She calms down. She eats the Kit Kat. As soon as the Kit Kat is gone, she screams her head off again. The dad gives her another piece of the Kit Kat. It goes on this way. So we get to close the door. Our plane starts to pull out and it's driving down the runway. And I look at Joe and I say to him, I'm like, "We're not going anywhere. This plane isn't going to go. I'm pretty sure it can't fly if she keeps taking off her seatbelt and running. Like, there's rules about this. And if they can't calm her down, we're going to have to come back. They're going to have to take her off the plane. We're going to miss our connecting flight." Like, I started to kind of get worked up because we had to catch a flight and this baby was right in front of us going insane. I've never seen anyone react that way on a plane. So we're on the runway. We're about to take off. We're literally going down full speed. And the dad gives her the last piece of the Kit Kat. And I turn to Joe and I say, "We're not going to make it." And he's laughing. Sure enough, the last bite of the Kit Kat goes and the girl goes nuts. Worse than before, screaming, kicking, yelling, mommy, daddy, pulling everywhere. So I kind of turn to Joe and I say, "I have to do something. I'm going to try to Reiki her." And I was still in my very early stages of Reiki, and from all I knew at that point was that you have to ask permission before you do energy work on anyone. So I technically am not supposed to be doing work on someone who doesn't ask for it. I later found out that for the greater good, you can do it in these situations, but because I checked with my master, I felt really bad. So Lois told me, "It's all fine, you were helping her out, it's okay." So I turn to Joe and I say, "I think I'm going to try to Reiki her." And he kind of laughs. He's like, "Yeah, okay, Steph, you try to Reiki her." So I put out my hands as if I had some kind of superpower because I've never done Reiki without touching someone before. And I close my eyes and I try to send her through my palms the most calming energy I can. I was like, if this is going to work, this is all I can do right now because I can't touch the child and she's going nuts. And because the child was going so crazy, the other little girl in the mom's hand started going crazy. So they were kind of feeding off of each other. So the 2-year-old was going nuts and the little 9-month-old in the mom's hand was going nuts. And these poor parents, they just had their hands full. They had 3 kids that were going crazy. The one was a little bit quieter, but the little girls were yelling and screaming. So I have my hands out and I'm just trying to send her calming energy. And I can feel that she's just petrified. She's just so afraid. She wants to be held. She's afraid of flying. She just wants to be held. And they were just not comforting her enough. So she was just really scared. As if cued in the same moment, the little girl in the mom's hand and the little 2-year-old both stick their heads out into the aisle and turn around and look at me. And they reach their hands out towards me. And I start laughing. And I turn to Joe and I say, Joe, like, I can't even make this up. And he's laughing because he's like, there's no way this is happening. The 2 girls stop out of nowhere, stick their heads into the aisle, turn around behind them. Like the little girl is half falling out of her mom's arm. She's trying to just see my face. And they're reaching their hands towards me. So I kind of think to myself, I'm like, okay, they're clearly feeling the energy and they want me to touch them, because if I can touch you, I really do believe that it's much more stronger than if I'm not physically touching your body. So I lean out into the aisle, I grab these 2 little girls' hands and I just send them as much calming Reiki energy as I can and as much as I knew at that time. And I was like, please just be calm, please just be calm. Like, this flight is only 20 minutes, we can make it, like, you can do it. And then the girls start smiling at me, and then they're giggling, and then they're laughing. And now I know, I'm like, okay, you guys are both fine. I kind of let their hands go. And they're smiling and giggling and laughing, and they both turn back around, and not another peep was said for the rest of the flight. And Joe was dying laughing. He's like, that didn't just happen. And I said, if you weren't here, no one would believe this story. No one would believe that these 2 little girls at the exact same time stuck their head out into the aisle of the plane, turned around, and reached for my hands at the exact same time. It was like on cue. It was so perfect. And then they were quiet for the rest of the time, and we just sat back there laughing. And then I heard that the parents were talking about that they had another flight, and I really wanted to tell the mom, on your next flight, you need to comfort your little girl a little bit more. She's really, really petrified. That's why she's reacting this way. She's not doing it for no reason. But I was so afraid that I would tell her that I was doing Reiki on her when I technically didn't have permission, that I didn't tell her anything. And when we got off the flight, the mom thanked me because she didn't know what I did, but she was like, kind of, thank you for entertaining my daughter or for calming her down. And me and Joe went on our way just laughing. And stories like this with children happen to me often. I really do believe that children are more sensitive to energy. You can Reiki children, and they don't need very much. So where an adult would need like 3 to 5 minutes on a chakra, a baby or a small child needs like 30 seconds to a minute. And they're very receptive to it. So another time I was at a store and I was working, and a mom and a dad come in with a little baby. And the baby's fussing and screaming, and the dad's hand fussing and screaming. And I was just talking to the parents, it's not my business. And the baby reaches its hands out to me like it wants me to pick him up. When someone's holding a baby and the baby wants to come to you, they kind of reach their hands and they move their hands like, come here. And the dad's kind of looking at the kid and he's like, oh, that's weird. He's like, he's never gone to a stranger before. And I'm not like the biggest child person, so I was just kind of like, oh yeah, like you can keep your kid. Like I don't need to hold him. And then again, the child's flinging forward, wanting me to pick him up. And I was like, oh, like, do you mind if I hold him? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I don't know why. Like, this never happened before. And then he kind of looked to his wife, and he's like, she just wants to go to this stranger. And I said, okay, like, I'll just hold him. Like, it's no big deal. I'm helping you in the store anyways. I'll hold the baby. So I held the baby, and he's in my arms, and he's laughing and giggling and, putting his head on my shoulder. And the dad is just dumbfounded. He's like, are you kidding me? He's like, he's not even comfortable with this with people that we know. And I didn't want to say anything because I'm just like, oh yeah, it's fine. I continue to help them around the store. And then it's about time for them to pay. So I go to give the baby back and it turns its head. It doesn't want to go back to its dad. And the dad again is like, what the hell? And he tries again and the baby won't go back. And he kind of tries to pull him out of my arms. So he pulled him out of my arms and he took him back, and the kid starts to scream, 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 scream. He wants to come back to me. He wants to come back to me. And I said, okay, you know what? I'll just hold him until you guys leave. And he said, okay. He's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know why he's acting this way. So I take the baby back, literally bring him around the back to the till so I could cash out his parents. And then we try to give him back again. The baby won't go. And I said, all right, I'll walk you guys to the door and I'll give you the baby back at the door. So I walked to the door with them. And now the mom and dad are both like, what? This has never happened before. He barely goes to like his grandparents or our cousins, and he's sitting here with you, a complete stranger. They're like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I was like, oh, I got to tell them. And I was like, so I do energy work. They're like, what? I'm like, I'm a Reiki master. I have this weird thing with kids where this actually happens quite a lot. I was like, I'll be walking and a kid will just want to come to me, or on a plane and I'll calm down a child. I was like, it's actually very common. Children are very sensitive to energy, so they can feel it. Like they know a good person, they feel comfortable, or they're just drawn to, I think they're drawn to the energy, to be honest. And they were like, oh, and the mom was super interested. And she was like, I've heard of Reiki before, but I didn't know that like kids were sensitive to it. So after a while, we tried to give the kid back one more time. He didn't want to go. So I talked to the parents a little bit more. And then because I had then told the parents that I was a Reiki master, I was like, do you mind if I Reiki him a little bit? It might, like, I can kind of tell his energy that it's okay, that he can leave me. And they gave me permission. So I just held on to his little feet and his little hands. And I said, you have to go with your parents now. You're going to be okay. But I need you to like stay calm when you go with your dad. You can't be crying. And I just, again, tried to send him a little calming energy. And I gave the little boy a hug. And then I gave him back to his dad. And off they went. And it was like the cutest little thing. So for this next portion, I want to explain a few stories, which is how I think my intuition started to grow, which led to also how my intuition works now. So when I first started doing Reiki, I used to clear people. And it was kind of a thing when friends came over. Joe would be like, do you want Steph to seance you? And they'd be like, yeah. And he had no idea what that meant, but I would sage them and I would Palo Santo them and I would sweep their energy out the window and kind of do what I was taught. So friends would come over and I would clear them and we would play music and I would light my incense and do the whole thing. Somebody that worked with Joe said, hey, can Steph clear me? I think I have the evil eye. She said, it's really bad. I can't sleep. I have a headache, all these things. And she said, I work till 11. Can I come over after work? And I said, yeah, come over. It doesn't take me long to clear. So if you come over late, it's okay. So she comes over and I'm doing my whole thing. I have her sit down on this chair and I'm starting from her head and I'm just kind of checking out where the evil eye is and I'm clearing her. My hands are on her shoulders. And I start with Reiki all the time. And I say to her, does your right elbow hurt? I said, do you have pain in your right elbow? She said, yes. I said, okay. So I go to her right elbow and I'm working on her right elbow. And then I continue on and I finish her clearing. Then at the end, we're sitting and chatting at the kitchen table. And she said, how did you know my right elbow hurt? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, my hands were on your shoulders and then my right elbow started to really hurt. But my right elbow didn't hurt right before. So I thought maybe your right elbow hurt. That's why I asked you. And she said, yeah, my right elbow's been hurting me for the past 3 months. I was moving and I was lifting a couch and I hurt it. She's like, I'm supposed to go to the doctor's for a cortisone shot in a week if it doesn't get any better. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, I don't know, but maybe the Reiki will help, so let me know how you're doing. She said, okay. So the next day I kind of followed up with her. I'm like, hey, how's your evil eye? Like, were you able to sleep? I didn't really think much of the right elbow thing. And she said, hey, yeah, I slept great. She said, the craziest thing is all the pain in my elbow is gone. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, all the pain in my elbow is gone. I've had pain in my elbow for 3 months. Nobody even knew about it. She's like, I don't know how you picked it up. She's like, and now it's gone. And then a few days later, she tells me that she canceled her doctor's appointment for her pain shot because she doesn't have any pain anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just one of those things that stuck into my mind of how I was first learning how to pick up on where people were holding their pain. To further this, I started an eyelash business around the same time this all happened. So when I started doing Reiki, I started to offer it as an addition to your eyelash appointment if you would like. So you could add 15 minutes or 30 minutes after your appointment, or just a clearing or a little chakra reset, whatever you would like. So I had one friend come over, and at the end she said, yeah, I really would like a 15-minute add-on. I said, okay, great. I explained to her what I did. So I did the 15-minute session for her, and at the end she stood up and she was sitting on the bed and she was like, wow, that felt really good. And she's like, what did you feel? And I was like, well, when I was starting at your head, it took me a while to kind of get past this, but all I could feel was I wanted to weep. I wanted to cry. I felt tears. I just kept feeling like I wanted to cry. My eyes were squeezing shut because I was trying not to cry. I felt like my eyes were full of tears, and I don't know why. And then immediately she started to cry on the table, and I said, oh, what? And she said, before I came here today, I thought to myself in my car, I just want Stephanie to feel my tears and feel my pain. And if she tells me tears, then I know that what you're doing is real. She's like, and the first thing you told me now is that you felt tears. And I was like, were you testing me? And she's like, well, I just wanted to know, if you would be able to pick up on, the pain that I feel inside. And I was like, well, I guess I could. And it was these things that started helping me realize when I'm feeling emotions, those are the other person's emotions that I'm working on. Or if all of a sudden, if I'm standing beside someone and my shoulder hurts, it's their shoulder that hurts. This happens a lot when I go to a yoga class. If I'm laying beside someone, if you have any type of pain in your body, I feel it. It's something I need to learn how to control because I can't go to classes now that I have to sit close to someone. So movie theaters are difficult. If I go out to eat with people, it's very difficult unless I know you very well. Anywhere like a bus is difficult, planes, things where I'm sitting close to someone, I really have to remember to turn off my dial so that I'm not picking up other people's pain or emotion or not really thoughts. People are always like, can you read my mind? And no, I can't read your mind. But if you're fighting with your kid and that's on your mind and it's also affecting your heart and you're holding it in your gut because you're upset, well then yeah, I'm going to be like, hey, you're fighting with your kid and you can't stop thinking about it. So I'm not reading your thoughts, I'm reading your energy. And you do carry and exude energy, so whatever's going on in your life, I can pick up on it. Another thing that happened to me when I just started my Reiki journey, I was out to coffee with a friend and we were chatting away for probably about an hour. We're sitting across the table from each other. And I was kind of telling her about my Reiki journey and things that have happened. And we were chatting about work, and she's a businesswoman as well. So we were just talking business, talking shop. And at one point she wanted to show me something on her phone. So we both leaned into the middle of the table to look at one phone. And our heads got very close together. And all of a sudden, I felt this wave of nausea and this headache like I've never, ever felt before in my entire life. I swung my head back and I was like, whoa. I was like, do you have the biggest headache in the world right now? And she's like, oh my God, yes. And I was like, I can't even sit here. What is that? I just got too close to her that even when I pulled away, I couldn't get away from it. I went to the edge of our little booth. She was kind of happy. She's like, can you feel it? Can you feel how bad it is? Isn't that awful? Can you believe I have to deal with this every day? And I was like, how do you stand up straight? This is the worst. It was just the worst nausea, headache. Headache isn't even a good word. It was so awful. It got to the point that I had to go sit across the coffee shop from her and wait until I felt better before I could come back and sit beside her. And I was like, this is awful. I don't know how you deal with this, and I don't know why I just picked it up. So it was things like that started to happen where I would be around people and I would start to pick up things. I had another client come in for Reiki and he walked in the door and I said, did you just break up with your girlfriend? He was like, yeah, 2 days ago. And I was like, oh, and was it your choice? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is she really upset about it? He's like, yeah. I'm like, but it's not changing your mind though. You know you need to break up. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, sit down. And he was kind of like, what? And I was like, I don't know, we're going to just start the session. So I hope that all these little stories of breadcrumb trails of things that have happened to me before episode 1 kind of help you piece things together. In hindsight now, they all really make sense, but at the time I just thought everything was because of Reiki. Oh, how can you do that? Oh, because of Reiki, I think. How did you know that? Oh, because of Reiki, I think. And I didn't really understand that it was anything more or that this was more than just Reiki energy healing. It was just a few years before where all this stuff started to happen, but I always really had an interest in the other side or in the metaphysical or in ghost I just always knew there was something more, and I just believed it in my heart as true, and I didn't know why. And I think for me, I didn't have any reason to not know why, if that makes sense. So this is what happened before episode 1. The next episode, episode 7, is going to jump right back into after episode 5. And I'm going to keep telling you all the stories from my little black book. So pretty much after that last incident, it started happening quite regularly. So I have a lot of little stories to tell you guys that will continue to lead us up to today. And really cool things keep happening. So I'm excited to catch you guys up to where we are today. So again, thank you for listening to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the Medium in the Middle. And I'll see you next Tuesday for a new episode. Thanks for listening.